Hello from Johannesburg, South Africa, in the south side of Johannesburg, LA, aka Lower Alberton, not Los Angeles, but Lower Alberton. We want to say a humble apologies to all our dear viewers and people that were expecting us at 12:30. You won't believe the ruckus we've been on, but we got you in one piece. Hopefully, with all our pressure levels all down. It took several devices. It took the hands of a village to help the child. And the guest that I have in studio that will be joining us is Val Pauquet. That was supposed to be at 12:30, but she's here. Hopefully that all the pressure levels are down, and I'm looking forward to this great conversation. Just by way of the lineup today, Val Pauquet now, right at the time of 2:27. We possibly will go within this conversation to about 3:30, and if we go a little bit less, that's all okay too. But it's about the quality of the conversation, the courageous conversations, the conversational story, thought leadership sharing that we've been doing over 6 months on in such a time as this. And as the host of the show, it's a great honor to have friends and colleagues that, like we've promised you, they have already spent their lives working to make sure that we can see an equitable, just society. So today again, we have Val Pauquet that in her own rights, over a career, long-standing career in journalism and working, as she says in her own words, as a media missionary, they have in some way done the work to consider and be about people building their lives toward an equitable state. Later on at 4 p.m., we have Reverend Calvin Souls coming to you all from another LA in Los Angeles. Now, as we set the tone, in September and October, we have been focusing on the theme heritage and well-being. As you know, over the last 6 months, on in such a time as this, in partnership with organizations like Heartlines, as a key driver of What's Your Story, collaborating with SACLI, South African Christian Association, or the SACC, I should say, we've been able to bring people that are leaders in our society and speak about what they are reflecting on. And hopefully, we've been able to bless people and favor people with a message that has given them some hope. We're grateful today to have our colleagues in studio and friends. Believe it or not, she's made it right here. I have her in one piece at this time. Val Pauquet is in studio with me, so let's get the show on the road. Hey. Hopefully this all works good. Hello, Val. How are
Hello,
you?
Seth. Well,
We
yes,
made
I'm
it.
fine,
We
thank
made
you.
it.
No, we're fine. Our whole family is fine. We've had our days, ups and downs in lockdown. And because we are less young and have some underlying health issues, we have kept to strict isolation. And as our adult children are spread around the world, one in Cape Town, one quite near us, and with our beloved grandchildren and my other daughter in Australia, we sometimes get lonely. And yet, this is the whole thing about lockdown. Uh, the time together has really helped us to deepen our faith and our walk with God, a time to check the scripts that run in our heads and line them up with God's values. In other words, renewing our minds. So, yeah, we're very thankful for each other. Not that there have not been when we've locked horns instead of arms, but we're grateful for each other.
And I'm grateful that you've taken the time to be with us. Those of you that know, we are broadcasting this show via live stream. So it's an honor to have you online, Val. And thank you for going through the length of a hustle to get you with me. We're grateful for just this time together. Friends, let me build a bridge of relationship. I came to know Val many years ago through our work with Youth for Christ, and obviously in some of the work that we had done around organizations like the Nelson Mandela Foundation, within the processes of knowing people that were doing work around reconciliation with organizations like Odessa. Val Pauquet's name pops up in those spaces, largely as a person that has used words throughout her life to communicate by and large stories of hope. So today, and more especially in the last, I can say, 11 years of my time in South Africa, I've been favored to draw closer to Val in and around the organization of Heartlines. So, Val, it's been such an honor to work with you, and then in some way say goodbye to you, and then still connect with you in other ways through Heartlines and other organizations as well. But so grateful for your role and what you've meant to people in, if I may say, in the industry of media, and also more especially as a person that has decided to work in media with your faith. Thank you for being a part of the show. Well, if I may ask, how has it been for you in a kind of a transition? Because I know you transitioned. It's been a life transition. I don't know how you would put words to it now. But what would you say to people as they catch up with you? Where is Val Pauquet at this time?
Well, yes, at this time, I'm not doing anything shattering at the moment, Seth, but I do continue to serve on the Heartline board, as you know, as an agitator and institutional memory, I think, and also as a trustee on the Forest Town Foundation. Um, for many years, I've been intimately involved with, as an activist in promoting the rights of people and with special needs. And by the way, did you know that yesterday was the International Day of Cerebral Palsy?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so that's really where it's all been. As I said before, it's been a whole new world being in lockdown, and it's it's been a great leveler. It's put us all on the same uh, plateau, really. And unfortunately, our default position is often to go to the news media to listen to the, the news and find out what's happening. And so we often fill our heads with all kinds of stuff that we really have, I as a Christian have in the Bible and can source at any time. So, yeah, it's been an interesting time, but here we are. And having just turned 70 I intend to be around for a while.
Wow. And I'm grateful that you are around, and I'm grateful that you are here with us, friends. By way of honor to Val, in a good African style of leadership, this is known to us. I want to give you there's a longer, lengthy profile that we could have on her, but by way of time, let me just read a little bit about what is quoted within one of the organizations that she said she's serving on. As you've heard, Val is part of the board of trustees or board member at Heartlines, best known as a national values promotion organization in the nonprofit sector. And over the last 11 years, it's been a great honor for us to do this work with Heartlines. Those of you that may have heard of Heartlines, you would have heard of Heartlines in line of values across the country. As of late, they've been notarized for their work around empathy, understanding, and trust. And you know that in the show, we use an approach called What's Your Story, that has gone national, and
Yeah.
we'll get to that in a moment. But for now, by way of honor to Val Pauquet, in a career spanning over 40 years in the print and electronic media, both in SA and Germany, Val, aka Val, an award winning journalist, has been intimately involved with and recorded historical events that have culminated in South Africa's new dispensation. Those of you that are around the world may be wondering what are they meaning about the new dispensation. We largely speaking about the big transition from an apartheid state to a democratic state. Val, together with many other leaders, iconic leaders of her time and remain. We're grateful today that you, as you talk about three score and ten, that our own Bishop Tutu has turned 89 years old today, and happy birthday to him. And I know that his life and Val's life have many crossings along their journey. So she was awarded, Val Pauquet was, the ACM, which stands for the Association of Christian Media Trophy for Outstanding Service in Ministry. As a member of media task group appointed by Thabo Mbeki, she researched government information in India, Australia, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Ghana, and Senegal. She has had extensive media involvement in Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine. She is retired and married with 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren. And in her own words, she loves her shots, George. Well, how did I do?
You did very well.
You
Shuts
did well.
is yes, you did well. And Shuts is Shuts. And we're so grateful for him. But yes, you did well. Thank you. But you know, when you talk like that, Seth, it's wonderful and it's great. But I really don't want to be known for what I've done, that my identity in who I am in Jesus Christ is what I want to be known for, not for what I've achieved or with whom I've rubbed shoulders. So thank you for reading that. Yeah.
Well, and tell me why is that? I mean, yeah, I'd like to just step in right there in this time of conversation. Why has that become important? And I mean, for a person who's lived over the length of time that you have, there are some other folk that are in, if I can say mid-career within media, because that's the industry you're from. There may be leaders, there may be pastors, there may be corporate folk who get to hear, just our conversation. But after living life, and as you
Mhm.
reflect in line of heritage, and well-being, why has that become important? Less about, if I can call it the bells and whistles of life. And you've done amazing work. You've worked with amazing people. What has become centered for you that now it's less about all of that? And what has it become about?
Well, I think it's got a lot to do with the older you get, the more you realize the unimportance of worldly things, and that we're closer to the end rather than to the beginning now. And when I get there, what is going to be my legacy? And so, from that point of view, that's why I feel very strongly about that. I mean, I make no claim to great literary genius at all, but to a school teacher who saw value in me. And so I think getting back to what you said, Seth, is titles and who you are seem to dominate, and who you are and what you do seems to give you worth. And I've realized over the past 2 years that my worth has to come from who I am in Jesus Christ. Um, yep. Do you want me to go perhaps further into the heritage of our country?
Well, let me just, if we can, and yes, the person, work, and teachings of Jesus Christ are important, and we believe that, for you, and I think for those of us that are out there, you can reflect on what that means for you as you hear Val say that. If you come in online, you're welcome to, in the chat line, ask a question. If we have the time, we can get to it. But also, please join us in, for the viewers that are online with us. Thank you for being here with us. We have Val Pauquet in studio. Val, and I'm grateful because, as you know, I too have a faith tradition. I'm grateful that I've grown up in
Yeah.
a family that brought me into the knowing of Jesus Christ in Southside Joburg for much of my life. Obviously, we hail from KwaZulu Natal, the kingdom of KwaZulu Natal, but then grew up in Southside Joburg, not the Southside that I'm in today in LA, Lower Alberton, but out in Lenasia and Land South. And I'm grateful for faith inspired people who saw Christ as a center of their work around justice issues. And that's become a key focus of my own life. And I think what's so beautiful to speak to you is in some ways you've spent your life doing that work around issues of reconciliation and justice and closing the gap between the I and the other. Since it is Bishop Tutu's 89th birthday today, and I know you've met him in different spaces, what's one of your memories that you may carry with you of having worked with the bishop as, in some way, a person that has done a lot around issues of justice and doing work for the common good?
Right. We're talking about Bishop Tutu.
Yes.
Well, I think, like many, I look up to him, and having worked with him on the Rustenburg Committee, where, as you may remember, apartheid was declared a sin by Willy Yonke, he was a voice of reason, but a strong voice against injustice. And I just feel that today, where he's at, he is a national treasure for South Africa and the world. May I give you a rather funny, humorous thing that happened with Bishop Tutu? It was
Please do.
very funny. I have, I have a son who's 6'7", and when I introduced him to Bishop Tutu looked up and said, "What do they put in your shoes? Compost." Well, I'm not sure that my son thought it was funny, but it is funny. Anyway, that's just an aside. I think the legacy is um, is totally unique, totally unique.
Val, in line of what you said earlier, and this is where we want to go to now, friends, those of you that are online, I've asked Val to prepare for us a little piece of her story. And as myself and Val take a rest from the screen, I want to bring to you a piece of the work of Heartlines in a synops video. The video is really capturing the work of a national campaign called What's Your Story. Through this work, we've been able to reach around March 2020, just before lockdown became, our ultimate reality on March 26th. Heartlines, together with their partners around South Africa, worked with about 18,000 people with a focus on building relationships of empathy, understanding, and trust. Let's check this video out as a primer that will set us up to take a moment with Val Pauquet as we get to listen to some piece of her personal story that she has prepared for us today. So, here, over we go to Heartlines and the What's Your Story national campaign.
The world moves fast around us. Sometimes it feels like a blur. We pass each other and make judgments of each other constantly. You're doing it right now, seeing this woman across the street. We cross and recross, but rarely connect. We struggle to understand each other, so we don't trust each other. I know your name, but I don't know who you are. You know my name, but do you know my story? What would help us see beyond our perceptions? Story. Our stories are what make us human. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. Sharing a story isn't hard. It's a simple human act, connecting us deeper to people we already know. Reach out. Ask, invite, then listen, truly listen. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. They help us understand. Ask, listen, tell. It's our way of building our nation. Heartlines has developed resources to help you on this journey. These resources will empower you to build understanding, trust, and reconciliation through personal storytelling. Imagine if we were part of a powerful wave of change, one story at a time. We all have a story to tell. What's your story?
It's been a great honor for me to have worked with that campaign over the last 7 years. When, for some of you, you will remember the work that we did around values, race, ethnicity, and reconciliation. This idea of connecting practical values in a way that we can find new angles of doing work that will bring the I and other together. That work evolved into what is now known What's Your Story? And What's Your Story is a national campaign that's linked to a movie called Beyond the River, an award winning movie that has been produced by Quizzical Productions together with Heartlines and many other partners who we are grateful for. But it has given us a new way to engage with people through the power of storytelling. I have in studio with me Val Pauquet, who, in her own description, would say a media missionary, today also cognizant of the fact that she no longer wants to just be, well, I shouldn't say no longer, but is cognizant of the fact that she wants to be known for what is the important matters in life versus the bells and whistles or the names and titles. And so, friends, as we take this moment, let me bring Val, who's in studio with me, into light as we take a moment with Val Pauquet. Val, I love that video and how it sets a tone for storytelling. I'll leave you to take us into this moment as those of us who you take into your confidence get to listen to a piece of your story, your personal story as we reflect today. Over to you, Val.
Thank you. Well, to give you some background, I grew up with my sister and widowed mother in Hospital Hill, near Hillbrow. And you know, I used to find myself nearby Jabir Park, where I would, pen in hand and a notebook, conduct make-believe interviews as a very young girl. And I'd go into the hothouse there and write up what I was looking at, and I didn't even know what the parts were, what the plants were. They were exotic, and I used to write that up. And that was as a young girl. Not many people know that about me. And who would have thought that God would lead me on the path that He has, right from those early days in Jabir Park. And as I said before, not because of any academic achievement or literary genius. I lay no claim to either of those, but to God's grace. And then I mentioned an English teacher who saw potential in my writing. But that this would happen later, that I would be found in these places, I think the pinnacle was for any journalist when I worked with Bishop Mvumi Dandala to have been present at Madiba's wedding. That was amazing, together with Tutu and other religious leaders. But there's been so much space, and my memory isn't what it used to be, Seth. So you will have to prompt me, I'm afraid. But there you go. Again, I value these last years. I value them in lockdown because it's a time to look not only at my walk, our walk, but the work of the church in general.
Well, I want to tap into just what you gave us access to because many folk that may have come to learn, here you are telling me that you came from Hillbrow. And even as I've known you over years, I never knew that piece of the puzzle because I actually also had a time in Hillbrow. For those of our folk who don't know, even in the time of Group Areas Act, certain spaces in Hillbrow were made accessible by, if I may say, white Jewish families to persons of color who refused to listen to the apartheid regime and allow people a place to stay. So my mom and dad also started out in Hillbrow, not too far from what is now known as the Johannesburg Theatre. But as you shared that with us, I mean, that landscape has changed so much now in the country, and that's where, in some way, your humble beginnings come from. And if I may think upon it with you, you tell me that you took a book in an imaginary kind of way with a pencil in hand. There may be other journalists, aspiring journalists out there. As you reflect now on that journey and what it has allowed you to go on by way of faith, by way of hope, by way of love, by way of the kindness of friends and colleagues, what will you say as we draw from your personal story to other aspiring, professionals and colleagues in the media and print industry?
Yeah, I think the foundation of journalism is to present a balance, but the balance has got to be on truth and not to. We're so full of hoaxes and news that is what do you call it? News that
Fake news.
isn't true. What? There you go. We're so full of that, and really, journalism. I have to be careful about saying this. In a day when I was with the Argus, you were trained in giving a balanced story. And that's the most important thing I can say, is look for the truth in everything that you write, because the repercussions are widespread. When I was on the Star, I had a column as a so-called television critic. And before I became a Christian, I used to write for effect. And of course, it was widely read. And only when I was enlightened by accepting Christ that I actually realized that I was writing stuff that was destructive. And so my column changed very quickly and very soon was no longer popular. Truth, let truth be your foundation, and check, and double check your facts. Don't be overcome by who you happen to be interviewing. They're just ordinary people like you and me. When I was with Deutsche Welle doing radio, when I first started and was being trained, they said, if you're feeling nervous, if you're in front of the camera, just imagine whoever you are speaking to are in their pajamas. Now that might sound strange, but it works. It brings it all down to earth. We're all the same.
It's a beautiful way to say level the playing field, and especially for me, I was saying the other day, someone said, "Hey, Sid, so how are you managing, being in conversation with folk? We saw that you connected with Dr. Busak," and I said, well, whether I'm connecting with a youth, one of my youth colleagues working in a high school, or an academic or theologian, or like a few weeks ago we had the chance to be in conversation with Musi Maimani, the reality is at the end of the day, people are people. And for those of us, especially those that are coming from the other side of the railway tracks in the justice way of life, we've got to work out every day how to deprogram the mind. And whether they are rich people or iconic people or poor people, we put a leveler in play that we can see people for their human dignity.
Absolutely.
And that's what's become important in this way of us doing our work. Val, we want to move from that personal story, and thank you for allowing us to tap into your life in Hillbrow and your reflections. And I hope that people out there will see this connection to the humility in some way, and just the acknowledgement of grace and kindness of folk, that it's not about me, about my expertise or my academic rigor, but also about this element of faith and grace that has taken you on your journey. If I may, I'd like to, you've mentioned the person of Jesus Christ a few times, and I don't mean to pry too much further, but I know that your journey has been one that took you out of South Africa and back. Why has faith become so important to you in your journalism, other than what you just said about the reality of checking your facts and telling the truth, which by and large is important in this economy, it's important in this time of politics, but how does faith impact your work? And what would you say to people in the media industry, people who are telling stories, people who are leading others in our society at this time? How does faith interact with our activism and with our work?
You can't separate them. Faith is who you are, and who I am in Christ is how I'm going to write, how I'm going to sum up a situation, how I'm going to respond to that situation. So it's totally inseparable. And I also believe that faith, you cannot separate faith from politics. For a long time, I actually thought you should, but I realize now they're intertwined totally.
And Val, how, I mean, as you yourself in Christ, I figure then you would describe yourself as a Christian. What would you say to folk that have really been struggling with folk that would claim themselves to be faith-centered people? They would even say that they are Christians. And in light of what's been happening globally, especially in such a time as this, if I call it, it's an irregularity of a faith that seems to be void of compassion, a faith that seems to be void of telling the truth, a faith that seems to be void of caring for the human dignity of others. How do we present ourselves then in an authentic way as faith-centered or Christ-centered people?
Yeah, well, it would certainly depend on how close your walk is with Christ, how close what you read impacts your life. I know that for a long time, Schatz, my husband, who you refer to, um, was really put off Christianity because of Christians he's met. And because the one business partner he had, I think that Interpol is still looking for them. Now, it took a long time, but it took a move of the Holy Spirit for him to realize that we are just humans, and we all are, but it's who we represent and who we radiate that is going to draw people to us. I know before I was a Christian, I really rebelled against being Bible punched, so to speak. And yet the Bible has become my handbook for life. So gently, how you live your life, what you put out there is going to draw people to Christ. We all have different personalities, and I'm quite sure that God doesn't mean us to change our personalities, but it's in Him that we have the impact.
Thank you, Val. Friends, those of you that are on board, I see some of our friends that as we're hosting somewhat of the show in what they call a watch party. Grateful to see Sean Moore, also Bafana Mabasa, and Dr. Leon Rodriguez. Some of you have had and known of Val Pauquet's work. Those of you that are online, please feel free to join in with the conversation. You're also free to share the resource. Part of putting it out like this is for people to connect with others in this time, in such a time as this. The next moment we want to go to is really, Val, what we've been focusing on in this last 2 months. September and October, we gave it a focus of heritage and well-being. And for those of you out there, we obviously in our South African landscape are in September focusing on our heritage. But at the beginning of September, or maybe I should say, to the close of August, beginning of September, a place that is very close to my heart because some of my own work and experiences as being a youth worker in Southside Joburg took place in places like Soweto, Lenasia, and Eldorado Park, the south part of Johannesburg. And at the beginning of September, end of August, I remember, and our country will remember, another violence that took place by the passing away of Nathaniel Julius, a child who was born as a child who lived with Down syndrome. And here we saw just a crazy happening of this child being killed by police officers, which again allowed an expression of if I can say, exclaimed and proclamation of anger that came out of the community of Eldorado Park. And we in line of what we do with in such a time as this began to think, how do we take from our heritage and consider what would it look like for our society to be well? What would it look like for our society to see a well-being for people, for persons, for communities? And so, Val, in that light, we want to take this moment to consider the concept of Sankofa. This idea of where it is that we've come from in order to acknowledge where we are and then work out where we can be. And so as we move into that space, those of you that are with us, we are talking about thought leadership. So as Val and I take a break from the screen, and when we come back, you'll be hearing about 3 key offerings: a critical reflection, a disruptive learning, and a call to action and service. But while we prep ourselves for that moment, check out this video as we think upon the importance of heritage and well-being through the concept of Sankofa. Sankofa or Sankofa. This was a concept that I kind of have had an experience in when I was in the States at Bethel University. Marisha and I, who is my wife and partner and friend, went on a journey through the southern states in the US, where we visited the places and spaces where Dr. Martin Luther King and other justice activists had been. For many of you that are in the, if I may call it, the northern hemisphere of our globe in the States, many communities have become accustomed to using the word Sankofa or Sankofa, this reflection. And even as we come into this time of thought leadership, think upon it. The only real mistake is the one from which we learn nothing. Today, I have with me in studio Val Pauquet. We want to move into this conversational story sharing, but through thought leadership. What is it that we should be thinking upon? What is it that we should be learning? What is it that we should be thinking upon as it relates to our actions to hopefully acquire a better quality of life for all our people? In studio at this time, I have with me Val Pauquet, and she will be sharing with us. Val, thank you for hanging around through the afternoon. Seems like many hours because we know that it took a lot longer just to get here, based on the
Yep.
technical glitches. But Val, as we think Sankofa, thinking upon where we've come from to where and where we are and where we'd like to be, what is a critical reflection for you in such a time as this?
Mm. Well, yeah, we come from a past that disenfranchised the majority. Today, we find ourselves where we are, not having achieved that much. And until this changes and we continue to exist of two countries in South Africa, I'm afraid that unless there is a genuine move of God's people, and there are many things that are happening, the future could look bleak. So you spoke of that young child with Down syndrome. Now I can bring together my passion for those who are differently abled. And so that is one aspect for me, and there are many others, that is crucial, that we are able to accept the other, whether they're handicapped, and I don't like that word handicapped, whether they're challenged. We're all challenged. But yes, that's where we should be applying what we do to those challenged people. We should apply that to everybody. I mean, I think I'm jumping the gun now, but using the power of storytelling is just so incredibly powerful. So, yep, I would say what is also interesting, Seth, and I don't know if I want to bring this in here, that Thursday was the 30th anniversary of the International Day of Older Persons. And it was UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres who noted that this anniversary is happening as we reckon with the disproportionate and severe impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has wrought on older persons around the world, not only on their health, we talk about their well-being, but on their rights. And so another study claims that because of the emotional stress of lockdown, people have aged. So how does that come into what you've asked me to say? It's bettering the lives of others in a way that is uncomfortable to ourselves. Yeah, I think I would sort of sum it up like that.
Well, I like this connection of the rights of folk who are more mature of age, and also considering the rights of people who are differently able in such a time as this. And when we link to the life of Nathaniel Julius, we've seen who are the people that have had, people have been speaking about the pandemic, but we've had a pandemic of racism. We've had the pandemic of gender-based violence. We've had the pandemic of if I can say, out of our own Collins Causa that emerged in Alex, and then the host of voices and of Black lives and movement of Black Lives Matter. But how is it that we can work with those? And in the words of Howard Thurman, he speaks about those living with their backs against the wall, those that are not accepted in mainstream society, those that are kind of outside the gravy train of the so-called, land of milk and honey. And so, even as you share with us, it's important that we think upon how we uphold the rights and work with people. Val, this next moment is around disruptive learning, and as I'm at the table with you, you know, I think we have been disrupted by COVID-19, even in our worship spaces, our socializing, and as an African people in the diaspora of Africa, but more especially in our South African culture, we have many spaces of socializing and moving about. But as you mentioned to me, the quote by Gutierrez, um, when we did our return to church planning, one of the documents that were written were kind of positioned towards those with comorbidities, those who are different. And we need to watch our language here, because then we'd say, well, all elderly people have comorbidities, so let's put them at the side of the church or at the back of the church. And all at once I began to think upon, in the words of Sojourner Truth and the likes of Dr. King, who are the people at the back of the bus? So even in this time, if we don't give a treatment in our design and our intentionality around human dignity, that at every table, every planning table, every design for the future, if we don't do that, then we'll be setting ourselves up for failure. And I guess what was disruptive about it was it's so easy to forget that. Even though you may have done the work of justice or reconciliation for some years, it's so easy to forget, well, I have my rights and I want to fight for the rights of others. But while you're fighting for the rights of others, you might be taking away the rights of those who you are so-called fighting against. And that's kind of, that balancing act almost that you got to remind yourself, even though I feel so agitated by or irritated by this other, how can I create a space for courageous and truthful and compassionate dialogue? And so that's been disrupting me, just in my own work, that we've got to be reminded time and time again not to lose the focus on being intentional around all voices are welcome here, even the ones I don't want to hear from, because if they don't speak here, where else will they be speaking? And how do we create those spaces and containers? So Val, that's kind of in the mode of disruptive learning. And I don't know about you, but today, as you've been thinking, as we've prepped for the show, what is it that has been disrupting you in such a time as this?
But yeah, mine is far simpler. Yours was pretty philosophical. When you first spoke about disruptive learning, I thought, well, what is a disruptive learning? And so the first thing that came to mind would be people who sigh heavily and wish that we would forget about the past and move on. That for me is disruptive. And you also said, in what way could I be disrupting them? Well, I'm sure my response would probably be disruptive to them. But the fact is, what you have just said has been a learning curve right now in this moment. How do I respond to those people? They have the right to say that. So I don't know if that gives any kind of substance to disruptive learning, but that was the first thing I could think of.
And Val, how have you found yourself, working with folk that otherwise, would be saying something that would be to you like, hey, how could you say that? How have you been, applying your learning over time, in some ways your wisdom, to deal with those who would, for example, say in South Africa, hey, can we just forget the past, please? The past is a past, man. Let's move on and live, What has been your response?
Well, I don't know that you want to know, but nevertheless.
No, I do. I do want to know. I think people would like to know.
It's very easy to become self-righteous. It really is. Depending on where you've been and who you've mixed with, it's easy to become self-righteous. But there is a way, and I think it's called grace, that is to walk alongside those people and say, have you perhaps ever thought of putting yourself in the shoes of those people who you are expecting to forget about what has happened for all these generations? And so what it requires on my side is grace and a listening ear and an understanding. And we've spoken about this, Seth, seeing myself in the other and the other seeing themselves in me without there being a blow up. Because invariably, depending how you approach it, there can be a blow up. And you could be written off and you've lost a chance. You've lost a chance.
A few years ago, when we speak about grace, I read a book, In the Grip of Grace, by John C. Maxwell, and it was given to me by Harvey McConkie, who worked with Youth for Christ in the United States, in the city of Minneapolis. He served as a youth worker, I think, for excess of 40 years. And when I met him, I was, about 19 years old. I think at that time he was already sweet into his early 60s. But really, here was one who was white and male, and here I was as an African Indian of Indian heritage coming across to the U.S. and what a beautiful relationship we found ourselves having. One where I was able to speak openly, speak courageously, but also one where another person of another race, another heritage and culture was able to listen and engage. But that book that was put in my hand really tapped into what you're speaking about right now, Val, about grace and the reality that there's a substance of this application of kindness to someone that kind of overwhelm even yourself, that you may want to say, no, I can't take anymore, but just this extension of an overwhelming sense that yes, we can continue to do this work. And I'm grateful for that we still have so many people that have been showing grace in this time. Val, the last piece of our conversation today is about this call to action and service. And in Joburg South right now, we are continuing to ask questions around how we continue to help people, even though it's level 1, COVID-19 level 1, in line of our well-being of our people. We know that even though we've been able to do some acts of kindness through food hampers and through connecting with people, coming along people in a time of great trauma, there's been so many people that have lost loved ones in this time. And in our community work, we've sought through with leaders and friends and colleagues to come around family, but we're also reminded that we need to continue these good acts of kindness. And so one of the pieces of the puzzle for us has been to begin thinking about how we can extend our work around, food security programs, around uh, uh, programs that will allow people economic earning opportunities or job creation programs. Because in a time when the economy will start, to show its own vibration of irregularities that will possibly hurt folk that have already been marginalized further, what can we do in such a time as this to assist? And so we're trying to to get around with some planning and focus about taking on this future, if I can say in some ways, of COVID-19 level 1 and beyond. We don't know when the vaccine will come, but it's been this idea that we gather as leaders to think through. Val, as you are thinking in your work, I think with Heartlines and the other organizations you have access to, what is it that we should be or could be thinking upon as a call of action and service in light of maybe a more equitable future?
Wow. Well, that's quite a heavy one, Seth. I think possibly because of my age, and I'm no longer playing in that area, I would really say an important part is to educate yourself. Educate yourself on the plight of the other. Especially as you talk of right now, it's Black Lives Matter, and ask yourself your reaction to those kind of issues. I think our government has come a long way in terms of what is happening and what is being uncovered. And I think that is crucial, absolutely crucial. And once that has been uncovered and the muck that's going to come out there, that has deprived a lot of people of what they could have had. And so, yep, I think that's it. Educate yourself. Be sure. And pray, Lord, where do you want me to be involved? Am I still able to add value? And to look at yourself and not look outside and think, well, they, those they, should be doing something. And prayer, undergirding of prayer in all these areas. It's simplistic, Seth, but it's my heart.
I love it. I love this reality. Those of you that are listening, Val Pauquet is saying, look at yourself. Don't just point the attention on others and then think upon prayer. Those of you that may know some of the works of prayer, and in my own journey of spirituality, I love the work of Taizé out of France, where they have a key focus on reconciliation and justice. But really, it's a lot of silence and prayer. And through prayer, they've seen a movement of young people come to faith, of young people take action in their cities. So I would also say, Val, because it's Bishop Tutu's 89th birthday, and we mentioned him at the get-go, I know in the tradition that of the work we do in Formwood, that Edwin Addison, one of the ministers he ordained, speaks about Bishop Tutu taking 7 moments in a day for prayer. Wherever he's at, he takes a moment to pause and to pray. And for those of us that are out there, I think prayer also gets you into a space of mind preparation and soulful preparation that reflects on what can I do in a faith-inspired way? How can I show up in the best way to make the changes that I can? So Val Pauquet, I want to say thank you. I know that there's been a lot of strenuous activity we've had to do to get to this place. Thank you for taking the time. As we close out the show,
I'd like to say something else.
Yes, please.
Sorry about that, Seth, but you heard me. I truly believe that at a time like this, that God is calling the world to reconciliation with himself. I truly believe that. And the simple thing, the question that could become a cliche, what would Jesus do? Therein lies the answer.
Wow. And Val, I thank you for that question. WWJD. And we say, what will Jesus do? There were some artists that sang it some years ago. And yes, it's a simple question, but a profound one. Those of us that are in faith, what would God call us to do? What would Jesus do? Val, as we close out the show, I'd like you to maybe say your farewell to people that have listened. Thank you to the viewers that have been online. Apologies that it took us some time to get here. If I tell you about the backstory of all the glitches we went through today, we just here by grace. Lots of grace.
Amen.
Lots of patience.
Amen.
Lots of people helping us. So Val, over to you to close out the show, and then I'll say goodbye and line it up for our later show starting at 4 p.m. So your closing words, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me express myself, and thank you for listening. And to all my friends, all the SMSs that I'm getting saying, what's happened? We'll give you the answer soon. But bless you, Seth. Bless you in the work that you're doing. And I thank you for including me. Bye now.
Bye now, Val. Thank you so much. Look forward to being in touch with you. And those of Val's friends that wanted to see the resource, it's online. I believe it's been quality enough that we can download it. We'll also upload it onto YouTube, and I'll send Val the link. So, Val, you can share it on with your friends and community. Thank you for your reflections.
Thank you.
Please, Val, as you go, I know that for some elders, they've done a lot of work, and so have you. Don't lose heart in the work of continuing to mentor and coach others. And if you can find the time, I know you do, but continue to share your voice for however many years you are given. Continue doing that work of investing in the generation that is coming after you. And like that song says, and may those who come behind us find us faithful. So thank you so much, Val. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss.
Auf Wiedersehen. Alles Gute.
Und dir auch. Gott segne dir. So, friends, it's really been an honor to have Val Pauquet in studio. What a delight to listen to someone that has worked in the place of media and print industry, working with words, the power of words. Words strung together can either break people or build people. I would like to say that we want to see people building. This is our promo piece that was put out today. We apologize to you all for starting the 12:30 show later than planned based on our technical glitches with Wi-Fi and apps and devices. Things weren't working well, but we got the show done. And thank you to Val Pauquet for staying on board and being available to do the show with me. We are also in a space of looking to the 4 o'clock show when we will return with Calvin Souls, Reverend Calvin Souls, coming out of another LA, Southside Los Angeles. So if I can say, this transatlantic conversation, as he would like to say, continues with me in LA, Lower Alberton, and him in LA, Los Angeles, the Southside. So look forward to seeing you then at 4 p.m. when Calvin and I engage in courageous conversation on In Such a Time as This, as we share stories and thought leadership that hopefully will lead us towards some activism, solidarity, and pursuit of a culture shift. Take care and be blessed till we see you again. Peace and out.